Why the Tour de France is exclusively for insane people. That is a hell of a title for a video. I'm really curious to see what we got going on. I've done one Tour de France video for beginners. I started there just so I had some type of understanding about the race. We're going to do this one, and then hopefully the actual Tour de France is happening in what, like, I think like a month, right? It happens in July. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's in July. Maybe when that comes around, we'll do like one video for once the race is completely over. It's really hard with some of this footage though to get it up on YouTube. These companies like to claim any type of stuff that is related to sports, especially if it's not done in like a cinematic version. So this one coming from the channel Student of the Game. I'll have a link for their video down in the description below. Without further ado, let's just dive straight into it.
Everything you need to know about the mentality of Tour de France rider.
Gosh, can you guys hear that? We have a massive thunderstorm right now. If you hear anything in the background, that's what it is. Lightning is going nuts right now.
Is happening right here in stage 11 in 2022. This is Slovenian cyclist Tadej Pogačar. He's 23 at this point. He's the two-time defending winner of the Tour's general classification, and he's wearing the yellow jersey here because he's leading this tour as well. If you built an elite cyclist in a computer...
That's right. Is it if you're leading, you wear the yellow jersey? Oh, man. Gosh, I should have freshened up on the last video I did. There was a couple of them, wasn't there? There was like 3 different color jerseys. For one was like individual, one was team, something else. I can't remember. The person that's leading the entire competition.
Pogačar is pretty much what
it's
you'd
in
come
there
up
somewhere.
With, but despite that, he's about to get pushed to his limits by another staple of the Tour de France: shenanigans. Because this is Primož Roglič, another Slovenian cyclist who's up here at the front, despite having no real business being there. Roglič dislocated his shoulder and injured his back a few days ago, so no one's really sure how he's doing this or what he's got left in the tank, including Pogačar, who's really extending himself to try and stay with him. These two have tangled before. Pogačar won his first Tour in 2020 by taking the lead from Roglič in stage 20, and keep that stage in mind because we'll come back to it in a bit. But here in 2022, Roglič is pushing through excruciating pain to give Pogačar someone to chase, hoping that he panics and takes the bait, giving Roglic's teammate, Jonas Vingegaard, a chance to make a move.
Sorry to any Danish people watching this for how I'm pronouncing I'm not even going to try his name. I promise I'm trying my best.
This moment showcases just about everything that makes the tour great, but also everything that makes it absolutely impossible for normal people. I need to come out up front here and admit that prior to doing my research for this episode, I did not know a ton about cycling. Wasn't against it.
Oh, okay.
I knew a few of the heavier hitters from the past 20 years or so, your Contadors, your Froomes. But while cycling isn't necessarily my specialty, analyzing the psychology of high-level athletes is. And that aspect of elite cycling, and really endurance athletics in general, has always been fascinating to me. Even if you are a casual like me, it's pretty clear that the people at this level are elite, both physically and mentally. But to truly understand how and why, I knew I was going to need some help. Dr. Jim Taylor.
I mean, I gotta imagine that it is mainly mental, right? I feel like any high-performing athletes, like, your body can take you so far and then it just becomes a mental thing.
Taylor is a sports psychologist that literally wrote the book on cycling psychology. In addition to being an accomplished endurance athlete himself, he's also worked with some of the best athletes in the world on their mental game, including some elite-level cyclists. So if there ever was a person to explain all this to me like I was 5, and connect it all to what's going on in the minds of these athletes, Dr. Taylor seemed like the perfect guy. And he didn't disappoint, even if he did have to start at the very beginning for my sake.
Well, for people who aren't familiar with cycling, road cycling in particular, the Tour de France is the top of the heap. The creme de la creme is the Super Bowl, the World Series, the Olympics all rolled into one. It's also considered the most physically demanding event in any sport, really, because it's basically 21 days with 2 days off, I think, covering several thousand miles all over France and other parts of Europe. And so, first of all, it's just to recognize just the physical challenge of being able to compete and race for all those days.
He's not being dramatic about that at all. The route of the tour changes every year, but this one race covers more than 2,000 miles of ground in just over 3 weeks. For reference, you could bike from where I live in South Carolina to Los Angeles and cover about the same amount of distance.
I didn't realize that it was that long. When he puts it in perspective for something that I can see, that's crazy.
Throw in a couple of the biggest mountain ranges in Europe and voila.
Hold on one second. It is really bad outside. All right, well, let's go. We're back. Thought I heard a tree snap out my front yard.
Voila, you've got yourself the world's hardest bike race. Why would anyone put themselves through that, I hear you ask? Well, why indeed, but it isn't just big mountains that make the tour difficult. Every stage presents a different challenge to its riders, both physically and mentally, and having to adjust to that from one day to the next is incredibly hard.
The races each day can go from a 10-mile time trial up to 125, 130-mile stage with 5, 6, 7, 8,000 feet of climbing. And so starting with this idea that it is incredibly physically demanding, which means that it's going to be also incredibly psychologically demanding.
I want to focus in on that last bit for a second, because when we talk about the psychological demands of a sport, a lot of people don't have a great vocabulary for what that actually looks like in practice. In cycling and in endurance sports in general, there are 3 constants that absolutely everyone deals with all the time. The first of those is emotions, and as soon as I say that word, I know what some of you are probably thinking. These are some of the most disciplined, hardcore people on the planet. How could being happy or sad possibly throw them off in a situation like this, when everything they spent months and years training for is on the line? Well, emotions aren't just nebulous feelings. They're mental states that have physiological consequences for the people experiencing them. The stress of a big race can increase the body's cortisol level, burning through the energy that a cyclist desperately needs to keep going. The adrenaline and excitement of a race to the finish can mask pain, allowing an athlete to push harder than they would have been able to otherwise. Emotions are a normal part of any elite cyclist's battle with a race like the Tour de France, and something that Dr. Taylor deals with all the time with his clients.
Everything from anger to frustration to fear to despair, all these things play out during the course of not just over 21 days, but during the course of a ride, because long endurance events like this just peel the onion of our souls away in a way, and bring out all kinds of emotions. And especially when these Tour de France riders get really tired and they're hurting, that's when the emotions can go really dark.
Let's go back to this stage from 2022 for a second. Primož Roglič is doing exactly what his team needs him to do here, attacking Tadej Pogačar to try and tire him out. But 2 years before this, Roglič's emotions got the better of him on the second-to-last stage of a tour that he'd been leading almost the entire time. With the 57-second lead going into the stage, Roglič was one time trial away from effectively icing his first tour win. But Pogačar absolutely smoked the last serious test of that tour, winning the stage and turning his 57-second deficit into a 59-second advantage. And as the stage progressed, you could visibly see Roglič reacting to this happening in real time. Once that happened, things started to go really dark for him. From there, there's really no coming back.
I've come to see that emotions ultimately dictate someone's ability to perform at their highest level, and then of course achieve their goals. And so if someone's overwhelmed with anger, frustration, fear, sadness, they're not going to perform very well, ultimately.
Dealing with the emotional element of cycling is a crucial part of doing well in a 3-week-long race. But the psychology of the Tour de France isn't just about feelings. These riders are also going to have to cope with the fact that riding that kind of distance at that level of intensity for that long really, really hurts.
Takes a toll on your body.
Let's talk about pain. Yeah. Pain is part and parcel of any endurance sport like cycling. In training, you have to put on the hurt, and we call it in cycling, you go to your hurt locker, and where it's just going to hurt a lot. And the ability to manage what's called exertion pain as opposed to injury pain, a really important distinction. Because if your ability to handle exertion pain will dictate how much you can push yourself, and your ability to push yourself dictates your ability to make gains in your fitness. So the ability to not just tolerate pain, but actually use it in an effective way is really valuable.
Basically, you have 2 choices when it comes to dealing with pain, and not feeling pain at all is unfortunately not one of them. Some people do try, though, even if it isn't very sustainable.
So what some research is, a sort of classic bit of research found that non-elite athletes, not elite marathoners in this case, they tend to dissociate, meaning they tend to distract themselves. So when they're in pain, they'll listen to music, they'll talk to people, they'll try to take their mind off it. And that can work for a while. But the problem is that basically what happens is during a stage of the tour, and everybody's pushing really hard and they're starting to hurt, is the body starts looking up to the mind and saying, this really hurts, we can stop now.
Overriding the body's natural response to pain can work for a while, but at a certain point, that response becomes so strong that not even the most conditioned athletes in the world can ignore it. In other words, If your plan for a 5-hour-long bike race through the mountains is to just ignore what your body is telling you, then you're pretty much turning yourself into a time bomb. There is, however, another option. Elite athletes don't dissociate to ignore or mask their pain, but instead associate to try and understand it. But how does that work exactly?
First of all, they can use it as information. And by using it as information, they might adjust their pace. They might change gears. They might change body position. And so they use the pain to tell them how they're doing and also what adjustments they need to make. Another key thing about association is paying attention to the pain is that they're engaging in what's called the prefrontal cortex. It's a part of the evolved brain that's related to weighing risk rewards, future consequences versus immediate consequences, considering options, and then ultimately making a deliberate decision. And so when you associate, when you pay attention to the pain and you think about the pain and what's causing it and how to deal with it, you're disengaging the primitive brain, which is telling the mind to stop,
The body to stop,
and activates the prefrontal cortex, where then you can choose: do I want to continue to push hard, and how do I do that, or do I need to back off?
This reminds me of being at the gym this morning. We had to do these planks with weights on our back. I do like I wouldn't call it CrossFit, kind of like CrossFit, like resistance training. And I had to have a plate on my back and hold the plank for about a minute and a half, 2 minutes while my partner did a workout, and I was literally dying. But my coach came over because I was like went down for a little bit. I'm like, oh my God, I can't do it. She's like, get back up, you keep going. I'm like, all right, push through the pain.
This is the answer to one of my first questions about the psychology of the Tour de France. How can people that are this exhausted and moving this fast have enough cognitive capacity to execute an actual strategy, especially when the stakes are this high? Look back again at this stage from 2022. Primož Roglič and the rest of his team, Jumbo-Visma, are all on the exact same page on what they're doing to wear out Tadej Pogačar. Their director sportif, or sporting director, which is essentially the equivalent of a head coach in competitive cycling, is coordinating all of this with his riders as the stage goes on, but it's up to them to execute those instructions as they come in. And they can only do this because they've trained enough to be able to engage their brains correctly. If you or I were out on this stage, we'd be in fight or flight mode the entire time, trying not to fall off the mountain and die. Thinking at all wouldn't even be possible, let alone thinking like this. And that applies to their pain, too. Pain is a challenge for normal people that often stops them from doing what they want to do, but for elite athletes who have spent years conditioning themselves to it, it's just more information. But no matter how much you train, there are some things that you simply can't prepare for. Remember how I mentioned earlier that Roglič injured himself in 2022? Well, he did that running into a hay bale, which definitely wasn't in the team plan, nor was his teammate Jonas Vingegaard losing a bunch of time trying to get his chain sorted out. In 2021, nearly the entire peloton got wiped out and one of the riders ran into a
Oh my gosh. Oh, that is so unfortunate. What are you doing, girl?
Nearly the entire peloton got wiped out and one of the riders ran into a spectator holding a sign, which is about as random as it was unfortunate. In addition to pain and emotions, one of the few certainties in the Tour de France is uncertainty, and to do well, riders have to find a way to deal with that.
Pro cycling, the Tour de France, is like Murphy's Law many times over. You know, that something will go wrong at the worst possible time, and it's a flat tire, going too fast on a descent, going off the road, one of the riders having a bad day and bonking. And that basically means that you just lose the ability to push. You can just basically turn the pedals and you just sort of get there, but you fall way behind. And so through experience, they learn that those kind of things can happen.
So one last time, let's revisit stage 11 of the 2022 Tour. Roglič is absolutely killing himself to eventually try and give Jonas Vingegaard an opening to attack. But when this tour started, there was every chance that Roglič himself would be the one pushing for the yellow jersey. He'd been in that position before 2 years ago, after all, and was one of the betting favorites to do the same thing in 2022. But then he got hurt and eventually had to withdraw from the entire tour. But while that would have derailed almost anyone else in this same position, Primož Roglič is a Tour de France cyclist, and Tour de France cyclists are not like normal people. Athletes with elite mentalities don't see things like emotions, pain, or uncertainty as obstacles in the same way the rest of us do. Roglič would have been well within his rights to be upset or even quit after getting injured in such a random accident, but he didn't. He and his team adjusted to what he was able to do, and guess what? It worked. Keeping up with Roglic's attacks in Stage 11 absolutely exhausted Pogačar and gave Vingegaard the exact window he needed to win the stage and take the overall lead in the Tour, which he never gave up. Was that the plan initially? I don't think so. The Jumbo-Visma documentary about that tour, which is great and you should totally watch, is literally called Plan B. But despite that, Roglic and his team recovered to win all but one of the individual classification categories, because they collectively and individually maintained control in each of these 3 categories. But that level of mental fitness doesn't happen by accident. It has to be earned through training, just like any other type of fitness, but unfortunately, a lot of people still don't value it that way.
So I often get calls 2 weeks before a national championship or some kind of big event. And it would be like going to a conditioning coach 2 weeks before and saying, "Can you get me in shape in 2 weeks?" It just doesn't work that way. I use this metaphor of, imagine, let's say Tour de France riders. They're about to begin the stage, and somebody makes a rider put on a 30-pound weight vest. How are they going to feel? Well, weighed down. How are they going to ride? Slowly. And so the most important thing that I try to convey when I first start working with athletes is approach mental training the same way you do your conditioning and your sport training. This is, again, a huge challenge because, sadly, taking a proactive approach to mental training still is not widely accepted at any level of sport, but more and more, but it's still got a long way to go.
The good news is that if you...
What is it? What was that? This guy reminds me, I feel like he is the version for cycling as Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan's mental coach that they had. This guy's written a couple of books. I have one of them. It might be up there. His name was Tim something. And he reminds me so much of him. And that's what you need, though, when you're a professional athlete like that. You need a mental coach.
Are willing to go that long way and devote the proper amount of your training to the mental side of things, the results might well be worth it, even if you do run into a few metaphorical hay bales along the way. Experience and learning and maybe even a little failure are all a big part of an athlete's journey no matter what level they're at, and there's no better example of that than our guy Primož Roglic. He won the Giro d'Italia back in April in an eerily similar way to how he lost the 2020 Tour de France, winning a time trial in stage 20 to take the overall lead at the last possible opportunity. You can have as much physical power and as high a VO2 max as you want, but until you learn to control the emotions, pain, and uncertainty of any single individual moment in a 3-week-long race, you won't do as well as you possibly could. So yes, the Tour de France is basically just a 3-week-long bike ride where one of the main entry requirements is being a full-on masochist. This race and this sport are for crazy people, a rare breed of humans who can put aside their sanity for a while so they can keep moving forward. But the cyclists who have the most success, and the ones who will end up wearing all the colored jerseys when the tour is over, are the ones who realize that learning from what's already happened, as well as preparing their admittedly insane minds for what's coming next, is just as important as preparing their bodies.
Man, that was a really good video. I am kind of excited to watch the Tour de France now. Is it going to be on during the World Cup? I have no idea. All I'm going to be doing for the next month and a half is just watching sports. Sports that I'm usually not watching. All right, thanks for the recommendation, you guys. That was really cool. If you want to see more cycling videos, be sure to hit the like button, leave a comment, leave a recommendation. I have a little link in the description. You can recommend a video. And yeah, with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Appreciate y'all watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.